Uncle Dan.
Hey.
We've talked before on the show about what a dumb kid Doug was.
Sure.
When he was like 4 or 5, he was just so stupid. It was ridiculous. But one of his favorite things, one of the things he would do is, because he was dumb, he called the classic McDonald's filet of fish a fish-o-lay, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah,
that's a better name. I think he wins. I'm giving it to him.
To this day, I mean, it's not like I order them often, but if I ever get one, I have to stop and think about it before I order it.
I haven't had one in years. I loved them when I was a kid. I'm sure they're just horrible, right?
Yeah.
They're probably exactly. They're made out of goldfish that have been flushed down people's toilets or something.
Yeah, just absolutely horrible.
Best, yeah, exactly.
But I do love a good fish dish.
Well, I think I can help with that. We find ourselves, dear uncles, at the dawn of the second decade of the 21st century, neck deep in culture wars. It seems like no matter where you look, especially because we are still mostly at home viewing the world through social media, that someone is offended by something and someone else is offended by that. Whether you're a Christian who is offended by the insinuation by Lil Nas X that Satan might in fact be gay, or you're a Christian who is offended that a trans child might join your daughter's elementary school soccer team and win all the trophies, or you're a Christian who is offended that your neighbor still hasn't taken down their Black Lives Matter sign, even though you've asked them to 3 times while driving by and honking, it really seems like you enjoy being offended. However, it's important to point out that to one degree or another, the culture wars have been playing out since the founding of this crumbling nation. Most of that time it's been white culture versus brown culture, and white culture's been on a bit of a winning streak. But the culture wars have played out on occasion in utterly pointless and thankfully nonviolent ways as well. Such is the subject of my segment today, the lowly Jesus fish. As we'll discuss, this symbol of Christianity has been around since the inception of the religion, and may indeed be its original symbol. But for most listeners will recall the Jesus fish had a bit of a renaissance in the late 70s and early 80s in the form of a decal or ornament that one could, and did, display on the back of their car.
Yeah.
Nothing says, I make good decisions, quite like proclaiming your inch-deep Christianity by buying a Chinese-made plastic ornament and displaying it on the back of your AMC Gremlin. The most popular version was just the simple dual arcs attached on the left side and slightly overlapping on the right. However, there were versions with a tiny cross on the inside or with the name of Jesus, or if you wanted to come off as especially insufferable, the Greek word ichthys. More on that in a minute.
Right.
In perhaps the most pointless battle in our never-ending culture wars, soon there were fish ornaments with 2 tiny legs and Darwin's name on the inside. A mini arms race would soon follow, with the Jesus fish eating the Darwin fish, or the Darwin fish stomping on the Jesus fish, and so on. Things soon calmed down, but the Jesus fish wasn't going anywhere. It's ubiquitous in Christian corporate logos, on necklaces, stickers, and of course there isn't a Christian band in existence without at least one prominent Jesus fish tattoo that they try and cover up during the custody hearings. So today let's talk about the Jesus fish, what it symbolizes and where it comes from, and when it comes from. Unlike so much of modern Christianity, the Jesus fish actually dates back to the origins of the religion. Wow. It actually shows up in some of the earliest Christian writings as early as the late 1st century and early 2nd century. So the fish itself is called ichthys and is an acrostic embedded in the Greek word for fish. An acrostic is when it's basically an acronym or an abbreviation. So each letter stands for something.
Right.
And the Greek word ichthys looks to us like IXOYE, although not exactly. So that's iota, chi, theta, upsilon, and sigma. And those stand for, respectively, Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. One thing that probably everyone knows about the ichthys is that it was a kind of secret handshake between early Christians.
Right.
The idea being that it was so dangerous to be identified as a Christian in the first couple centuries CE under the Roman Empire that it was best to be cautious. So one Christian would draw a simple arc in the dirt with their toe, and if the other person was not a Christian, nothing would come of it. However, if they were, they would draw the second arc completing the ichthys. Now both out of the closet, they could proceed to complain about gay people. Here's the thing. That is all basically made up. Firstly, there is absolutely no contemporary writing at all from the earliest Christian texts all the way through to the conversion of Constantine that speak of the ichthys as anything of the kind. The ichthys is brought up a lot as a symbol of Christ, but never once is it referred to as some secret sign. Layer onto that, most current Christians believe that the ichthys was used as a secret symbol during the terrible reign of the dread Emperor Domitian from 81 to 96 CE. As we've discussed on this show many times, it turns out that Domitian, like many of his fellow emperors, was surprisingly lenient towards local religions. Now, there were emperors who were sons of bitches, but Domitian wasn't one of the worst. Many of the earliest Christian writings and engravings occurred during his reign, and there is no evidence that Christians had to engage in such drastic subterfuge. Lastly, the Romans were known for many things in the ancient world, but they weren't generally thought of as stupid. This little secret code was not the zodiac cipher. Had the Romans been all about finding and persecuting Jews, it seems unlikely they would not have been able to crack the code of the ichthys.
Romans had all kinds of methods to get you to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to be Alan Turing to figure out the little fish thing.
Exactly.
It's also like we should probably do a whole segment sometime about how Domitian has just been kind of rebuilt as this arch villain that the Christian martyrdom narrative needed, right?
Yeah, and there were shitty emperors, but Domitian wasn't one of them. So anyway,
Yeah.
so even though it does indeed date back to as far as anything in the Christian pantheon, this little story about it being a secret greeting is total bunk. So leaving that aside, let's move on to what the symbol means and how it came to represent Christianity. One of the earliest references to the ichthys is from Tertullian, writing in the late 2nd or early 3rd century, where he talks about, quote, "we the little fish," in reference to baptism. As we'll discuss, Christianity is very much a water-based religion, as represented by their introductory ritual, baptism. St. Augustine wrote in the 4th or 5th century CE that Jesus was able to live without sin in the abyss of this mortality as in the depths of the waters. I think that one's just a little bit of a stretch, trying to describe the ichthys. There is a school of thought that the ichthys is in reference to the Pisces in the zodiac. Pisces is in play from February 19th to March 20th. Now, because Jesus was absolutely 100% a real guy, we don't know when he was conceived, we don't know when he was born, and we don't know when he died. There are different sects of Christianity, especially in the Ethiopian and Gnostic sects, that believe that Jesus was either conceived, born, or was killed during Pisces. So, there's that. Most likely,
You gotta love it when you cross the streams and you combine your Christianity with your.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'd love to see
Astrology.
Jesus's charts.
most likely the relationship between Jesus and fish are the myriad stories in the New Testament relating to Jesus and fish.
That's what I always assumed. It came from the fishermen.
Exactly. His
He's
whole
the
cadre
fisher
of
of
early
men.
Exactly. His whole cadre of early disciples were fishermen. Like you said, Uncle Dan in Matthew 4, Jesus famously called out to Simon and Andrew and said, "Come follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Jesus spent a lot of time fishing with his men and not only calmed a storm in Mark 4, but even walked on water in Matthew 14, demonstrating his airbender-like power over the water. In John 21 and Luke 5, Jesus tells Simon Peter and John where to cast their nets so as to haul the most fish. And, of course, when he fed the multitude with but a few fishes and loaves of bread that Uncle Dan talked about in episode 82. That miracle, by the way, is the only miracle of Jesus that is reported in all four Gospels. Although,
Really?
Yep, but because it's the Bible, the chronology, the size of the crowd, and the number of fishes differ by each account. But hey, it's not like the book is supposed to be true or anything.
Right.
Finally, of course, is the aforementioned ritual of baptism, which plays a huge role in the entirety of the New Testament. Whatever form this ritual actually took in early Christianity, whether it was immersion or just a nice moistening, it was a water ritual. It seems pretty clear that gospel writers thought it very important to point out that Jesus had specific powers over water and the fish that lived in it. So it's not really a surprise that early Christians adopted the symbol of the fish to represent Jesus.
So he's Aquaman.
Basically, he's Aquaman, totally.
Yeah.
Which is funny coming from a Mormon perspective because as all of the Mormon missionaries know, it's the devil that lives in the water.
That's right.
Exactly.
The devil has
That's
dominion
so
over
true.
the waters.
Yeah. Well, it's so again. I say it's not a surprise that early Christianity would adopt the fish. It would seem, in fact, to be a far more appropriate symbol for Jesus than the cross. The fish represented his life's mission, his miracles, and his most important ritual. The cross represented only the moment of his death, and would seem to be a far more appropriate symbol of Roman justice.
Well, it took more than just a moment. It took a while.
Well,
It took
but
a few
also
hours.
it's the murder weapon. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a bizarre choice.
It is,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think it because the fish, it's many things, but it's also kind of about abundance, which ties back to his, feeding the multitudes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's odd that it didn't stick.
Yeah, well, it did stick. It just didn't win, right?
Right.
Like the cross and the fish were dual icons of Christianity, especially early on. But if there was a competition between the two, it seems pretty clear that the cross won.
I don't know if you did any, if you saw any of this in your research, but just from my kind of anecdotal life experience, it seems to me that when I see the fish being used in a contemporary sort of way, it's usually kind of more hippie Christian, kind of good, kind of good guy Christians. Like maybe they're trying to reclaim that or something.
I think that's true, but I think the thing is that the symbol of the Catholic Church is most definitely the cross. But you can see the fish everywhere as well in Catholic iconography. So
Right.
I think right now, like we're talking about putting it on the back of your car, I think you're probably right. But the fish has always been there, but it's just been in the background more than the cross.
Right.
Interestingly, there was another symbol that had a short-lived day in the sun, the 8-spoked wheel. If you stack all 5 Greek letters on top of each other that make ichthys, you end up with an 8-spoked wheel.
Huh.
So for a while, this symbol was actually quite common in early Christianity for the first couple centuries CE, but for reasons unknown, it fell out of favor, and it's basically only known to religious scholars now.
It's because it resembled more closely the angels of the Bible, and everybody got confused.
That's probably right.
Yeah,
So-
the Ezekiel's wheel or something.
Exactly. We'll probably never know the exact date or location of the ichthys as a symbol of Christianity when it arose, and likewise the exact reasons for its adoption. But it is truly one of the OG parts of Christianity from the beginning. It predates many of the books of the Bible. But we could all that can be true, and the story of it, how it's a little secret handshake to throw the Romans off the scent, could still be total bullshit. So
Yeah,
that's not. Yeah. Good.
I remember in in art school and art history talking about in the catacombs how the fish was a fairly common symbol.
Yep.
If indeed it was true, that the Christians were meeting in secret in the catacombs, and also how for quite a long period the imagery of Apollo and Jesus can't be told apart. Right. At some point, the Christians co-opted Apollo's imagery, but it took a while for them to develop their own, the Jesus version of it. Right.
Right. Yeah. So that's it. There's not a hell of a lot to it, but it is out there.
Yeah. Well,
I love it. It's go out there and be a fisher of fish and leave the men alone. That's
Go
what
up to
I
a Christian and do a little arc in the sand and see what they do.
Everybody should write. Listen, next time you're at the beach, sort of shimmy up next to some guy standing there, and then just make some sort of design in the sand with your toes. Just see what he does.
I didn't look this up, but there's a great story about how when the Pizarro and his conquistadors caught up with the Incas in Peru, who had just finished like this major war and were kind of the king was in motion, and so he wasn't really in his fortress. And anyway, bad luck all around. But apparently the Incas had no written language, so some conquistador blew the king's mind when he was trying to explain to him written language, and he's like, watch. And he wrote the word Dios in the dirt. And then some random other guy came along and he said, hey, what does that say? And he said, Dios. And so it kind of like was that moment, but pretty fascinating. Anyway, got a tangent there. So
All right.
eat
Let's
fish.
move on.
Yeah, go eat some fish and we'll move along.